Penguin Random House Audio presents The Talented Mrs. Mandelbaum, The Rise and Fall of an American Organized Crime Boss by Margalit Fox. Read for you by Saskia Maarleveld. For two remarkable Elizabeths, Rogers and Loris Ritter, my New York homegirls, and for Teresa Elizabeth Williams. Ryan. Who runs things? Hammett. The same people who run things everywhere. Ryan. The cops, the crooks, and the big rich, huh? Hammett. Who else? Hammett. Directed by Wim Wenders. 1982. Prologue. A Glittering Hoard. New York, July 22nd, 1884. They were detectives, accustomed to plunder, but they'd never seen anything like this. It had taken some doing to open the safe. After bursting into the modest haberdashery shop on Manhattan's Lower East Side, they'd demanded the keys from the shopkeeper, Fredericka Mandelbaum. But Mrs. Mandelbaum, a towering woman of 59, tastefully attired in diamond cluster earrings and a lace-trimmed gown of dotted blue, held firm. "No," she declared in her heavy Germanic English. "Just to think of such a thing." Her refusal forced the detectives, employees of the storied Pinkerton agency, to become safecrackers themselves. They summoned a blacksmith, who arrived at the shop with hammer and chisel. He attacked the safe. Amid the din, a pretty teenage girl ran in from the next room. Mrs. Mandelbaum's daughter, Annie. "Stop!" Annie cried. She handed over the keys, and the safe was unlocked. An Aladdin's cave spilled out. There were gems and jewelry of every description: rings, chains, scarf pins, bracelets, glittering cufflinks, and collar buttons. Almost every ornament you could mention, one detective recalled. Beside them were heaps of gold watches, and wrapped carefully in tissue paper, watch movements and cases. There was a clutch of fine silverware. There were loose diamonds the size of peas. Elsewhere in the shop's clandestine back rooms, protected by a metal grill and linked to the outdoors by a set of secret passages, the detectives came upon priceless antique furniture, a trunk brimming with shawls of the finest cashmere and curtains of exquisite lace, and bolts of silk worth thousands of dollars alone. Concealed under newspapers were bars of gold, fashioned from melted-down jewelry. Upstairs, in Mrs. Mandelbaum's gracious bedroom, they found melting pots and scales for weighing gold and diamonds. She and an employee were promptly arrested. With that, the Pinkerton detectives, who had staged the raid at the behest of the city's district attorney, accomplished in a single outing what New York's police force had not managed to do in more than 20 years. The force, which bore various names over time, would not be known as the New York City Police Department until 1898, when the 5 boroughs that constitute present-day New York were consolidated into a single city. "You are caught this time, and the best thing that you can do is to make a clean breast of it," one of the Pinkertons, Gustav Frank, advised Mrs. Mandelbaum as she was led away. In reply, Fredericka Mandelbaum, upright widow, philanthropic synagogue-goer, doting mother of 4, and boss of the country's most notorious crime syndicate, whirled and punched him in the face. For 25 years, Fredericka Mandelbaum reigned as one of the most infamous underworld figures in America. Working from her humble Manhattan storefront, she presided over a multi-million-dollar criminal operation that centered on stolen luxury goods and later diversified into bank robbery. Conceived in the mid-1800s, long before the accepted starting date for organized crime in the United States, her empire extended across the country and beyond. In 1884, the New York Times called her the nucleus and center of the whole organization of crime in New York. Until the late 19th century, New York was often hyphenated, in the manner of compound adjectives. The New York Times was among several of the city's newspapers to employ this form. Then, on December 1st, 1896, without a word of explanation to readers, the Times jettisoned the hyphen forever. Revered in some quarters, reviled in others, Marm Mandelbaum, as she was known, towered over the city as an earthy, expansive, diamond-encrusted presence. Self-made entrepreneur, generous philanthropist, thieves' mentor, and gracious society hostess, who plied her illicit trade largely in the open. A swath of the public admired her. Many criminals adored her. Over the course of her long, lucrative career, she would spend scarcely a day behind bars. Without question, the 20th century criminologist has written, the fullest attribution of energy, presence, and personal magnetism in the literature of criminology belongs to Ma Mandelbaum. For Mrs. Mandelbaum, trafficking in other people's property was staggeringly good business. Her network of thieves and resale agents was reported to extend throughout the United States, into Mexico, and, it was said, as far away as Europe. At her death in 1894, she had amassed a personal fortune of at least $500,000, in some accounts as much as $1 million, the equivalent of more than $14 million to $28 million today. Here and throughout, contemporary dollar figures reflect the historical inflation rate of late 2023, when this book went into production. As the New York police chief, George Washington Walling, who knew her well, recalled, the ramifications of her business net were so widespread, her ingenuity as an assistant to criminals so nearly approached genius, that if a silk robbery occurred in St. Louis and the criminals were known as belonging to Marm Baum, she always had the first choice of the swag. Walling, 1823 to 91, served as superintendent of police, as the chief's post was then known, from 1874 to 1885. In her heyday, and for some years afterward, Marm was a storied figure, the subject of news articles, editorial cartoons, and more than one stage play. The plays include The Two Orphans, Les Deux Orphelines, an 1874 French melodrama featuring the nefarious matriarch of an underworld family, produced in New York in English translation that year, and The Great Diamond Robbery, an American melodrama by Edward M. Alfred and A.C. Wheeler, which premiered on Broadway in 1895, the year after Mrs. Mandelbaum's death. That production starred the Prague-born actress Fanny Janicek as Mother Rosenbaum, a successful receiver of stolen goods, indisputably modeled on Marm. The world press covered her criminal prowess with a kind of grudging admiration. It covered her downfall with post hoc smugness. Mrs. Mandelbaum's death, for instance, was reported in newspapers throughout the United States and as far away as London. But despite her renown in her own time, she is far less well-known today, an all-too-common fate for history's women. Though there are passing references to Mrs. Mandelbaum in a spate of books on New York City history, there are few in-depth studies of her life and work. Marm kept no written records. No fool, she clearly knew it would have been professional suicide to do so. As Chief Walling observed, she was shrewd, careful, methodical in character, and to the point in speech, wary in the extreme. But her career turns out to have been amply chronicled, not only in the news accounts of her day, but also in the reminiscences of her contemporaries on both sides of the law. As a result, she can be conjured whole from the glittering 19th century city in which she operated, the redoubtable star of an urban picaresque awash in pickpockets and sneak thieves, bank burglars and high-toned shysters. And from her glittering presence, it is possible in turn to conjure the city, a wide-open town careering its way through the flash age, the time when the mantra of one suspiciously well-heeled Paul, "I seen my opportunities and I took 'em," was a guiding principle for many New Yorkers. When 21st century Americans hear the phrase organized crime, it almost always evokes the Prohibition-era guns and garlic gangsterism of Scarface and the Untouchables. In keeping with common usage, this book employs the phrases organized crime and syndicated crime interchangeably. But the term was first attested in the United States in the 1890s, and, as Mrs. Mandelbaum's career makes plain, the practice was a going concern here well before that. In Europe, earlier still. These days, one analyst notes organized crime is a fuzzy and contested umbrella concept. It has been applied variously, at times promiscuously, to entities as distinct as the Sicilian Mafia, the Yakuza of Japan, and the drug cartels of Colombia and Mexico. In short, about the only thing on which scholars of the field can agree is that when it comes to...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?